This week, Jamaica is the center of the Caribbean community, highlighted by a meeting of our heads of government on Thursday and Friday in Montego Bay, with the opening ceremony on Wednesday afternoon. To bring us up to date on what we can expect for this week, and especially the heads of government meeting, we have with us the Secretary General of the Caribbean Community, Ambassador Irwin LaRocque. Ambassador LaRocque will make an opening statement, following which we will take questions. Ambassador LaRocque.
Thank you, Leonard, and let me bid a very good morning to members of the media, both here in Jamaica and throughout the Caribbean community. I want to thank at the outset all of you for coming, and to thank UETV for facilitating and partnering with us in streaming this press conference live to the people of the community. From yesterday, 1st of July, Prime Minister Holness became the chairman of the Caribbean community. He will serve in that capacity for the next 6 months, and he will chair the heads of government meeting, which begins with an opening ceremony on Wednesday afternoon in Montego Bay. The working sessions of the Conference of Heads of Government will begin on Thursday and into Friday, with the first day devoted to the CARICOM single market and economy. There will also be a discussion on that day, along with the CSME, on the Golden Commission report. There's been a review of the CSME. I'm sure you've been hearing about it. We reported on that at the last meeting, relating to previous decisions and commitments and an implementation plan with timelines which has been set out. Earlier this month, we heard the views of various stakeholders. I held a stakeholder consultation in Georgetown, in June it was, to hear from them their perceptions on the CSME and how best to make it more effective, and these views will also be presented during the discussions to our heads of government. Another major item on the agenda is disaster management and recovery. The effects of last season's hurricanes are still very much being felt in the affected states. As we are all well aware, most of our member states and associate members are in the hurricane belt, and given that the forecast is for more intense and more frequent megastorms, we have to be prepared for dealing with more disasters similar to Hurricanes Irma and Maria. These discussions will be taking place against the background of the need to build a climate-resilient community. The effects of climate change are a major challenge quite apart from the megastorms. Other events such as prolonged droughts and unseasonal heavy rainfalls also require us to examine our preparedness. The Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency is having a series of meetings on building resilience and disaster risk management starting today in Montego Bay, and the results of those sessions will be reported to the heads of government when they meet. The report of the Marijuana Commission will be presented to the leaders. The report will be presented by the chair of the Regional Marijuana Commission, Professor Rosemary Bell Antoine. This independent commission, comprising of experts in the fields of law, ethics, sociology, psychiatry, medical and social research, and criminology, looked in depth at the social, economic, health, and legal issues surrounding marijuana use, and have arrived at recommendations which the heads of government will deliberate on. We'll also be having a presentation on non-communicable diseases as part of our health agenda. We have two special guests who will be with us on Thursday and Friday. The President of Chile, His Excellency Sebastián Pinera, and the President of Cuba, His Excellency Miguel Díaz-Canel, will be our special guests. President Pinera is no stranger to us in our community, since he interacted with our heads, I think, in 2012. And the newly elected President, Díaz-Canel, of course, only having been sworn in as President, will be interacting with our heads of government for the first time, although Cuba is no stranger to interacting with our Caribbean community. Both countries are great friends of the region, and with cooperation that covers a wide range of areas. On Wednesday, just prior to the opening ceremony, there will be a meeting of the Council for Finance and Planning, also in Montego Bay. And that meeting has a number of items on its agenda that will lead in to the discussions of the heads of government when they sit in plenary the following day. Later that day, on Wednesday, and just prior to the opening, the new President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Mr. Justice Adrian Saunders, will be sworn in. He is the third judge of the Caribbean Court of Justice, and as I said, this will be taking place in Montego Bay. He will be sworn in by His Excellency the Governor General. On Thursday morning, prior to the plenary, the Prime Minister Holness, who is the chairman of the Prime Minister's Subcommittee on External Negotiations, will also have a meeting of that subcommittee to deal with certain issues pertaining to Brexit and post-Cotonou negotiations, and generally international trade issues that are impacting upon our region. And that, of course, will also feed into the heads of government meeting later. Later today, just for information, I'll be interacting with youth of the community via social media this afternoon. It's an event I have every time we have a head of government meeting to hear their views on what should be doing in the community. And to close the week off, on Saturday morning, the annual CARICOM 10K race will take place in Montego Bay. We're expecting runners from 10 countries. And for those who are less fit, there'll be a 5K. And for those like myself, I hope there's a 2K or something like that I can participate in, but we'll see what happens. And I will round off the week of activities on Saturday morning. So as you can see, we have quite an agenda before us, a program before us, and an agenda of issues for consideration. Thank you very much. I'm open for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Secretary General. And please, when asking your questions, could you state your name and the agency that you represent? The floor is open.
Hi again, good morning. Jeline Pearson, RGR TVJ. Just some clarification with the inclusion of the President of Chile and Cuba. Just want to know if there are any, or if you can tell us if there are any agreements that we're going to be entering with those two countries that you could share with us?
As of this point, there are no documents to be signed. There are, for instance, I'm aware that areas for cooperation will be proposed. When we had the CARICOM Cuba Summit, I think in December of last year in Antigua and Barbuda, we had discussed with Cuba a number of agreements that we're working on, one on climate change, one on technology, science and technology. The one on climate change is fairly well advanced, but I don't know that it will be signed at this sitting now.
Okay.
Morning. Sharon here, Webster, News Talk 93 FM. The issue of the ganja is very current, and we've seen changes north of us, particularly in respect of Canada. Now, given that our island states have been known to grow some very special brands of the herb, is there any real consideration of undertaking legalization that allows trade? That, I think, is the most critical issue, the issue of banking and trade in respect of ganja. How do you anticipate this to be addressed at this meeting of CARICOM?
I think we have to separate marijuana based on what one considers to be the two uses, recreational marijuana and medical marijuana. Certainly, the Commission encourages, in addition to decriminalization of marijuana, freeing up marijuana for scientific purposes, for medical use. Within that context, I would imagine that one could allow for trade in medicinal marijuana. And there's a distinction to be made. The international law governed by various, starting with the UN, there's a protocol of the UN, would preclude, at this point in time, the trade of recreational marijuana. Even within the United States, for instance, you can't move marijuana from those states who have legalized it into those states who have not, unless it's medical marijuana. But I think the Commission will be making some very far-reaching recommendations in terms of decriminalization, in terms of moving towards regulation rather than as a controlled substance, such as we have for alcohol, and moving more and more into the area of tobacco. But recognizing the very important medicinal uses of marijuana as well. So that will be deliberated upon by the heads.
Good morning, Steve Ann Simmons, Nationwide News. So one, in terms of immigration, and when I say immigration, I mean immigration to countries like Britain and the US, there seems to be not a unified CARICOM voice on that issue. Will that be discussed at the conference?
Well, we have dealt in a very, very unified way on the issue of what obtained in the United Kingdom recently. I'm sure you would have seen the CARICOM, our high commissioners, our ministers, our heads of government interacted on the Windrush issue in an extremely unified voice. I'm not sure what you're referring to. We do have concerns about how our nationals are treated when they migrate. We do have concerns about some of the pronouncements that we're hearing on some proposals that may be before Congress in the United States. And while it's not specifically on the agenda, the item could very well come up. But we've dealt with the issue in terms of the Windrush issue very, very thoroughly. In terms of, well, I don't think that's migration. I've got to say about the deportees. That is a matter that we're constantly discussing and trying to deal with the countries from which deportees are sent back home.
Mm-hmm. In regards to, I'm just following up on the question my colleague asked about the Cuban president. What exactly is the significance of the Cuban president attending the forum and discussing with us?
Well, Cuba has been a friend of the Caribbean, and the Caribbean has been a friend of Cuba for many, many years. You recall that when Cuba was blockaded, when there was the embargo on Cuba, 4 CARICOM countries, Jamaica being one of them, stood ahead and went and defied all international other countries and recognized Cuba diplomatically. And we've had a very, very special relationship with Cuba. This is the 3rd president since the revolution, and it is important to note that so soon after him being sworn in, that he'll be meeting with us. I think that is a very significant visit. If I'm not mistaken, it probably is his only 2nd formal interaction at that level, which signals the strength of the relationship between Cuba and the Caribbean community.
A research fellow wrote in the paper this morning, well, she was quoted in the paper this morning, calling for more information for young people so we can get them more involved in CARICOM and get them more informed and, you know, getting transparency and all of that. What strategies are in place to get more young persons aware of the CARICOM pushes and things like that?
Well, we have a CARICOM Youth Ambassador Corps. I just want to make mention of that, which is comprised of 2 persons from each CARICOM member state. The person who you referred to as a research officer was a CARICOM Youth Ambassador. She's still a youth, incidentally. And we interact with them and we have sessions with them. They are charged with promoting a number of issues on behalf of the community in their respective countries and region-wide. For instance, CSME is one of the issues, HIV and AIDS is another one, climate change, and non-communicable diseases. I will be meeting with them this afternoon, not only the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors from Jamaica, but from all of the community, and we'll be streaming live to the youth of the region. It's something I do regularly. But in addition to that, there's need for more information dissemination. There's need for more data on what we're doing. First of all, to be had, the data is not readily available. And once it is available, for us to be able to publish it so that it's all known. We are moving in the direction of publishing the decisions of the heads of government. I want to make that clear. This meeting of the heads of government sometime afterwards, I can't say immediately after the meeting, we intend to publish the decisions of the heads of government. And that's a start in being more transparent in terms of what the heads have decided going forward. And I think we'll continue in that. Our social media outreach is another important platform for interacting with the youth. But a lot more needs to be done. I recognize it fully, and we're making our best effort to do so.
We have a question online brought to us by Dr. Roberts.
Good morning, Secretary General. We have a question from Laura Dorrit Phillips. She's asking, will the heads of government discuss the issue of intra-regional air travel and the issue of reduction of taxation in regional airports? She also wants to know about the issue of LIAT and getting governments to increase their contributions to LIAT.
Transport will be discussed under the rubric of the single market economy. Of course, you cannot have a single market economy without moving people. And one of the instruments that we completed at the last meeting will be open for further signature by heads as the multilateral air services agreement. So there will be a discussion on air transport. As far as LIAT is concerned, I suspect it will come up. It's not formally on the agenda. As you know, LIAT is owned by some of the governments of the Caribbean community, and they're doing a splendid job in moving people around. And we do know that there's some challenges, but LIAT is doing a splendid job. It wouldn't surprise me if it came up, but it's not formally inscribed on the agenda.
We have another question from Demerara Waves. What exactly did the CARICOM Commission on Marijuana recommend?
Well, in essence, they're recommending the decriminalization of marijuana. They're recommending it be deemed to be a substance that is controlled and managed as alcohol. They're recommending that we make available the legislation be put in place to allow for research for medical marijuana. There's some concern about controlling it in terms of youth and adolescent use. There's some concern about driving under the influence, all of the concerns that normally attend to what obtains for other controlled substances such as alcohol. These are the major ones. I think decriminalization being, I think, the biggest one. Mm-hmm.
Secretary General, another question online. You already mentioned in your response to colleagues about the heads of government already discussing issues around Windrush and immigration. But someone here is asking, would the meeting discuss Brexit and U.S.-Caribbean relations?
Brexit, yes. Brexit will be discussed first in the Prime Minister's subcommittee on external negotiations, which is going to be chaired by, the chairman, Prime Minister Holness is the chairman. That committee will meet during the course of the week, Thursday morning, very early. And Brexit is a matter on the agenda there, as well as I mentioned, the post-Cotonou arrangements will also be discussed there. And what was the other question? U.S. CARICOM.
U.S.-Caribbean relations.
Well, not specifically and directly, but in terms of certain international trading developments, that will be of concern. That will be of concern to CARICOM heads, yes.
Good morning, Brian Walker from the Gleaner Company. Okay, I'd like to know if during the CSMA meeting later this week, if there will be any attention paid to Haitian nationals and their right to enter CARICOM countries and the position of CARICOM states in relation to that.
Yes, there will be a discussion on Haitian nationals on whether a visa is required for them to enter the community. That discussion will take place. Okay. That was a mandate from the last meeting of heads of government. Okay, and do you know what have CARICOM states pointed out their positions on the matter already in terms of legal opinions, etc., in terms of the treaty? Well, I know I heard an announcement of one member state, namely Barbados, already has moved or will be moving to remove the visa requirements on Haitian nationals. I know the matter has been receiving attention among some member states, and the matter will be fully discussed when we meet on Thursday.
Okay. Additionally, in the Golding report, it's noted that the CARICOM Secretariat, there are some issues in relation to garnering and gleaning financials in relation to the CARICOM Secretariat and other agencies, and the CARICOM Secretariat told the Commission not to include the financial data in the Golding report. I'd just like to know what was the reasoning behind that. And we know that you said that you're pushing now to lift the veil, but in terms of financial data, what was the reasoning behind blocking that inclusion in the report?
All I will say is I regret the communication that was sent, and the budget will be made available.
No,
I see no reason why the budget should not be made available, and it will be made available. I regret that the communication was sent, and the budget will be made available. It will be published on our website. Give us a little while. Soon enough you'll see the budget and the decisions and all these relevant information, including audited reports and whatnot. There's no need for them not to be made available.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted clarification. Prior to Brian's question, you said there would be discussion on the person who asked a question about the Caribbean-America agreement or trade relations. Yes. Just want to clarify that. Does this include the tariffs and how it affects CARICOM nations? Just to be clear.
Well, yes, we are concerned that there are investors in our community on which either tariffs or other types of restrictions have been placed, and it's affecting these investors here in Jamaica, Guyana, and elsewhere, and we are very concerned about that. So that will be discussed.
Kimon Francis, Jamaica Observer. Just to follow up on what Jeline said, what is CARICOM doing then, since some of our investors are being affected by the tariffs imposed by the U.S.? And what will CARICOM do in the future? What are the strategies that you guys are coming up with to protect any further imposition of tariffs?
Well, the most one can do, quite frankly, is lobby and lobby and lobby. You see other countries being affected. You hear what they're doing. There are no tariffs imposed on CARICOM, so there's nothing to say that we can impose a tariff on anybody, and that's not a matter of contemplation. But we are concerned about some of the extraterritorial implications when sanctions are placed on an investor from a particular country that impacts upon us, and we have to speak about it, and we have to try to encourage persons to recognize the impact is not only on them but also on us as well, and that is our strategy.
Thanks. I can't remember exactly which heads of government conference it was, but I noted in one of the reports that one of the issues among CARICOM countries and members of the CFSME was that member states were denying CARICOM nationals entry, but they weren't reporting it to CARICOM. They weren't reporting the reasons behind it. Has there been any improvement in that?
There's a decision that members, when you deny entry, you are required to report on the person and why. We're actually in the process of negotiating a protocol, so it's not a matter of it being done in your way and my way, but a manner in which we all agree on, all the member states agree on, that is informed by the Shanik Mairi judgment from the CCJ. That is very, very far advanced. I wish I could tell you that it was ready for adoption at this meeting. It may just be, but I don't think so. But we've seen an improvement. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I read in the media last week that the Foreign Minister of Jamaica recognized that some improvement has been made, and we've seen that. But the problem still persists. And reporting is important in terms of persons knowing why it is that they're denied entry, in keeping with the CCJ agreement. So work is in progress on that. Can that mic be made louder? Is it? I have a difficulty hearing. Can this mic be made louder, please? There's no speaker in here.
I'll put it closer and just speak to it. Right. So this is just a follow-up.
Yeah.
What are you guys? Don't you guys consider sanctions for these countries that don't adhere to CARICOM rules?
At the moment, there are no sanctions, no.
Will there be? I guess that's why they're not following.
If I had a crystal ball, I'd be able to answer that. Certainly, I'm of the view that it is something that we have to look at. It is something that I believe will come up in the discussions this week. It will come up.
Just a quick follow-up on that. This is not about entry for a visit, but in respect of work, because people are looking for work throughout the region. But the issue of the certificates and what is allowable, so to speak, is up for consideration. I mean, I've had so many things pass my desk recently where skilled people are not accepted because it's not part of the CARICOM certificate. Is there any review as to what will be certifiably allowed, if I can use that phrase?
I think it's very clear what are the categories of skills that are allowed and what are the conditions upon which skill certificates are supposed to be issued. The question is whether or not it's being adhered to. But the heads of government have approved 10 categories of skills. I don't remember them all off the hand, but there are 10. And also persons who are service providers who are going to apply their trade could also get certificates for moving to apply their trade. The problem we have is that they have not always been applied in a consistent manner across our region. And that is an issue that will be discussed coming up. That is a real issue that needs to be discussed and regularized. I mean, some countries require you to have 2 certificates, one from the sending country, one from the receiving country. Other countries don't, and the decisions are clear. So this matter will be discussed.
Secretary General, Cynthia Joseph, watching online on UATV, has asked whether the issue of correspondent banking will be discussed at the conference and whether you could provide any update on the challenges faced in achieving that.
Sure. Correspondent banking will be discussed first by the Ministers of Finance when they meet on Wednesday morning. It's among the issues. The blacklisting as well that has taken place of some of our countries as non-cooperative tax jurisdictions, and that was by the European Union. That also will be discussed going forward. We've had a program of activities that we've been working on the correspondent banking issues. So the update will be provided on that, but it's an issue that's very much on our mind that we are going to continue discussing. I understand that some progress has been made, but the issue has not yet been resolved on correspondent banking.
Swatland Marshall from the Guyana Chronicle. Some countries within the CARICOM are approaching the 4th round of mutual evaluation with respect to anti-money laundering implementation. I know they've had some training sessions, for example, in Georgia and Guyana, but what are there any other projects or initiatives that are going to be discussed to assist countries that are having significant difficulties in implementing anti-money laundering legislation?
Yes, there are. Those are being done mostly under the auspices of the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force. The training workshop you mentioned, which was for the judiciary, which extended to all CARICOM member states, was organized by the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, the Commonwealth Secretariat, and the government of Guyana hosted it. That was the most recent one. I know that the FATF also has programs in other member states on some of those issues. And certainly from the policy angle, from the other angles, it is a regular issue that we're discussing. We have a committee, a task force that's headed by Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda that meets from time to time with not only with member states but with the banking sector to look at some of those issues. And more recently, we have a smaller task force, hands-on task force of persons looking at the blacklisting issues. So these are a number of different things that we're working on, and all of that will be discussed at the finance ministers meeting and then move up to the heads on Thursday.
Ambassador LaRocque, you would have spoken or you would have called repeatedly for international support with respect to building a climate resilient community. Last year you made a strong appeal after Hurricane Irma and Maria. Since then, have you seen maybe you said while support is given, not enough is given. Have you seen maybe an increased response from the international community? And is there any project or initiative in the pipeline that will be discussed during the Heads of Government conference between CARICOM and the international community with regards to support being offered?
I had a follow-up meeting 2 weeks ago with the development partners, with the donors. As you know, we met in November. You referred to it in New York. I had the donor conference. I did a follow-up meeting, a smaller one, in Barbados, where we got an update on pledges that were made and actual resources being transferred to affected states. We had discussions on areas in which what we call regional public goods that we need to develop in terms of assisting member states in building resilience. I left there feeling very positive. At that meeting, we were informed of some pledges that we were not aware of before, that were not insubstantial, let's put it that way. I'm very much aware that there's quite a bit of discussion between these donors and directly with the affected countries, but there are also discussion on regional projects, because the idea is not only to impact the affected countries, but how do we build resilience in the other countries so that in the event that we are faced with another such hurricane down the road, how do we strengthen our resilience so that you mitigate against such damage? And that, as I mentioned to you, CIDEMA, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, which is our core unit agency working on these matters, as we speak, having a session in Montego Bay, and we expect that and other initiatives to be reported to the heads. The matter is on the agenda of the heads of government.
A question online from Vivian Price. Vivian would like to know if the heads will discuss relationships with the African Union and whether CARICOM will have a permanent representative to the CARICOM Union. To the African Union, pardon me.
That specific item is not on the agenda. We had hoped that we might have had a prominent visitor from Africa, but that didn't materialize. We continue in our outreach. Only a couple of weeks ago, I happened to have met the new commissioner of the African Union. I must have missed a chance encounter, but we met briefly, and we have since been in communication. We recognize the need to strengthen the relationship between the African Union and the Caribbean community. I think we both recognize that, and that's something we're going to be working on.
Yes?
We have a question here from Miguel Angel asking, will there be any discussion of the rights of the LGBT community and the issue of free movement in the community?
No, that is not on this current agenda. It's not inscribed on the agenda. So I'm not anticipating any discussion on that matter.
Yes? Final question? Yes.
Online is active.
Yes, from
this is good.
General Waves in Guyana, listening online. What is CARICOM's unified position on Venezuela? And they ask this question against the background of states like Guyana and St. Lucia being members of the Lima Group.
I think if I was to be so bold as to maybe suggest that the question is there a unified position? As distinct as we all know that there are different positions on the issue of Venezuela that's played out in the OAS, but there's some very, very common principles that all member states adhere to. Non-interference, the rule of law, dialogue between the parties, and constitutional resolution of the problems facing the Venezuelans. That has been a common position that has been adhered to. Beyond that, of course, we've had different views among the member states. I think it's well known.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. Thank you very much, members of the media and those of you online. And we look forward to some very informed coverage coming out of our meetings this week. Good afternoon to you all.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.